welcome back to my channel. Today I'd like to talk to you about the AP English Literature Open Question Essay. So if you are in AP English Lit, then you know that the test is basically broken up into two sections. The first section is all multiple choice. You have an hour to answer 55 multiple choice questions based on a number of passages, both prose and poetry, and sometimes they throw in drama as well. I have a video about how to be really successful on the multiple choice that I've already put out, so definitely check that out if you haven't already. Today we're going to be focusing on the last of the three essays in that second section of the exam, which is, of course, the essay section. You are given 2 hours to write 3 different essays. There's the prose essay. You'll be given a passage and you'll write an essay based on that. There's the poetry essay, and then there's the open question essay, which is the one that you can prepare for the most. So that's what I'm going to tackle today. How can you effectively prepare for the open question in a way that really sets you up for success? So the first thing you need to do is choose the works that you're going to prepare. The open question varies, of course, from test to test, but basically it's just a really general kind of question like, since many works of literature deal with characters who are at odds with their environment, choose a great piece of literature that highlights one of these characters and explain how that conflict between the character and his environment illuminates the overall meaning of the work. And then they'll always provide a list of works that you can choose from at the bottom just as examples. You are not married to that list. If you don't see the work that you prepared on that list, don't panic. As long as it's a work of equal literary merit, then you're golden. So you need to choose the works that you're going to come in ahead of time knowing really well. So the key to choosing some good works to prepare for the AP Open Question is to choose books that you like and you know really well, that you've read all of. If you read an excerpt, for instance, in my AP class, we do read some of the Canterbury Tales, but we don't read all of the Canterbury Tales that are available, so I wouldn't recommend choosing anything like that you've read a little part of and you liked, but you haven't read the whole thing. You have to have read the whole thing. And you need to choose more than one. I would suggest having 2 main options with a backup option that's really different. So choose from a variety of time periods, countries, themes. Maybe you're a big Shakespeare fan, like I am, and you're really tempted to say, okay, I'm going to prepare Macbeth and Othello. Those are going to be my 2. If you do that, you're limiting yourself. Every once in a while, the questions in the AP Open Question get a little bit more specific, and if they throw you a curveball, like something about humor, sure, you can answer it based on what you know from Macbeth and Othello, but if you had prepared another work that was significantly different and maybe more lighthearted, you would be setting yourself up for more success. So an example of some works that I just had lying around as examples, maybe you could choose Notes from Underground by Fyodor Dostoevsky as one of your main works. It's a little bit easier to know well because it's shorter. Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. Really different from Notes from Underground, both thematically and in almost every other way. So if you like this book, you could choose that. And then maybe as a backup, you could go with Twelfth Night by Shakespeare because it is more lighthearted. It's still considered a great work of literature, but it also includes some comedy and some different themes that the others don't tackle in quite the same way. So your focus will be these, and your backup will be this one. So once you've chosen your works, you need to review them carefully. Maybe you feel like, oh yeah, Their Eyes Were Watching God. I remember everything that happens in that. I cried my eyes out at the end, like we all did. What in the world? But anyway, I don't want to spoil anything. Even if you feel like you know the work really well, still go back and review it. The way that you can do that most effectively is by choosing the handful of scenes that you think are the main turning points, the ones that will apply to the most important questions. So review the very, very beginning, review the very, very end, and then choose maybe 3 scenes in the middle of the work that are going to be landmark scenes. Know those inside and out. Don't know the Cliff Notes version. Cliff Notes is actually not a bad idea for just reviewing in general once you've read an entire book, but for something like the AP Open Question, you need to know more than just what happens. You need to know the play-by-play. How did that conversation go down? What were the kinds of words that the author used for that crucial description? I remember I had a student, I think 2 years ago, if I'm remembering correctly, and she finally, right before the exam, really caught on to this idea that the more specific you could be in this essay, the better life was going to go. So she chose to prepare 1984 because that really resonated with her. 1984 by George Orwell. And I remember in one of her open question practices, she brought up the pink spongy meat that the characters eat toward the beginning of the story. It was a disgusting detail, but the wording was almost identical to the book, and it was something that just clearly proved that she knew what she was talking about. She had read that book, and she could bring any detail from it to the table in her effort to answer that prompt. So that's the kind of familiarity that you want to have with all of the works that you're preparing. Know those specific things. So once you've identified those specific scenes and you've reviewed them and you think, oh yes, I've got those scenes down, the next thing you're going to want to do is figure out what is the overall meaning of the book. This will be always a part of the prompt that they give you at the open question. The other section of the prompt changes. Maybe it's that man versus society thing. Maybe it's about a scene of violence that has a big impact on the story as a whole. Maybe it has something to do with an eating scene that has makes a difference to the story as a whole. But always included in that prompt is the idea of the overall meaning. How does this, whatever this specific thing is, contribute to the overall meaning of the work? Now, the overall meaning of the work is what the audience gets out of that book. Now, there's a small range of possibilities here. It's not like there is one way to read Their Eyes Were Watching God and every other way is wrong. One of the nice things about great literature is that there is some room for interpretation. Not infinite room, of course. There are ways to misinterpret Their Eyes Were Watching God. But you do have some leeway there to say, here's what the audience is supposed to get out of this story based on what happens. The message is this. This is the overall meaning of the work. Usually, with some thought, you'll be able to figure out what that overall meaning is. If you're struggling to figure out what the overall meaning is, take what is literally happening, or what literally happens in these books, and add what the audience feels about those raw facts. This happens, audience feels this way. If you're really at a loss, that is going to be your gateway to figuring out the overall meaning of the work. So you can funnel all of your talk about man versus society or the scene of violence or whatever the more specific piece is, and bring that all back around continuously to the overall meaning. So you've chosen your work, you have identified those key scenes that you're going to bring up regardless of the prompt, whatever that is, and you've decided what the overall meaning of all these works is. So you are well on your way to doing super well on the AP Open Question. You've prepared. Now the next tips I'm going to give you are, while you're writing the essay, a couple things that you can do to make your essay stand out. So if you were just here for the preparation piece, thanks for stopping by. I just have a couple more things to help you be successful on the essay itself. So the first thing you want to do as soon as you are starting that AP Open Question essay is to start off with a bang. Do not rephrase the prompt. That is the most boring way that you can go about this. I mean, just picture those poor AP essay readers locked in a room. I think they're in Florida or somewhere on the East Coast for hours on end reading these essays. That is a tough gig. I don't even care that they get paid a lot. I don't want to be a part of that myself. My point in saying this is you do not want to bore these people. If you start off with a sentence that is boring, then they will be automatically inclined to give you a lower grade just because they're human beings and they're tired of reading all this nonsense. You need to show them that what you have to say is not nonsense and that you are sparkling and interesting. So you need to start off with something that is specific to the book and relates to the prompt, but is not just restating the prompt. Maybe just start off with that hook. You know how everybody talks about hooks at the beginning of essays or stories in English class? Start off with a hook. If you want some examples, just include in the comments that you would like to see some examples, and I can type some up for you. I feel like that would be easier than giving you some of these hooks verbally, but start off with a bang. Second thing you want to do, and I have mentioned this before in other videos, but I will say it again, be specific. You know that specific information about Notes from Underground or Their Eyes Were Watching God, right? You're talking about Notes from Underground. Make sure to bring up those specific things that you found in those scenes. Don't talk generally. If you rely too heavily on summary, you cannot hope to get more than a 5 out of 9 on that essay. And of course you want to get, if possible, a 7, an 8, a 9, one of those higher scores. So make sure that you're not just summarizing, be as specific as you possibly can, talk about those pink spongy meat. Even if you're not sure that the reader who gets your essay will know exactly what you're talking about, if you throw in those specific details, then trust me, they will be impressed and much, much more likely to award you the essay grade that you deserve for having worked so hard in preparation. The AP essay graders grade on, of course, the 1 through 9 scale. If you want to get an 8 or a 9, the buzzwords that they tend to talk about at those grading conference things are perceptive and persuasive. Your essay needs to be perceptive and persuasive in order to get an 8 or a 9. So not only should you be specific, but you should also go beyond the obvious as much as possible. Talk about the significance of what you're saying. Ask yourself, so what? And make sure that you're diving into those details. Why does any of this matter? So be specific, but also go beneath the surface of just what's happening in the story and make a perceptive point about it. If you're not sure what perceptive point you're trying to make because you only have about 40 minutes to crank out this essay, that's okay. Start out with something specific, follow that train of thought, and make sure that at the end you wrap up with a profound conclusion. Why does any of this matter? What was it that I was leading up to? If you're used to putting thesis statements at the beginning of essays, that's awesome. That's normally where they belong. But with an AP essay that's timed and so high-level specific like this, it's okay if you put your thesis statement, your overall claim, what it is that you're going to prove in the entire essay, at the end. It's actually not a bad way to end an AP essay because that is the prevailing impression, the last note in the symphony, if you will, that the AP grader is going to get. And so if you stop with the point that you've been proving all along, that's going to leave a really strong final impression with the reader. So if you have any additional questions about how to be successful on the AP English Literature exam, especially the essay portion, then don't forget to leave comments, like this video if you liked it, and don't forget to subscribe. I do post new videos on Mondays, so I hope to see you soon.